like to pay tribute to the person who inspired this topic by deconstructing the notion of truth. And this is this person, of course. And so, after the election of this individual, and after the Brexit vote, we are supposedly entering the age of post-truth, which is defined as relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. So if what matters in public and private life is your belief about certain topics, everything that does not accord to your beliefs becomes fake news. And if it's fake news, it might just as well be fiction. So this person called this book a work of fiction because it's a book that described the chaos in the White House. So this idea of, this leads to the topic of my presentation, which is theories of fiction. So in this presentation, I will survey 4 approaches to the notion of fiction, and I will ask different questions of them to see how they differ from each other. So I will begin with what could be called a naive theory of fiction, or it could be called a Trump theory. Fictionality means falsity, and a work of fiction does not refer to anything. So when we call this book a work of fiction, we mean that it's all invention on the part of the author. And quite often we read, this is just fiction, to mean this is just false. I will contrast this naive theory with 4 literary or philosophical theory of fiction, and 2 of them I call the world-oriented theories because they postulate a notion of fictional world, or you can call it a story world or a textual world, and the other 2 theories do not need a notion of world except for the world we live in, the real world. So I will start with one of the worldless theories, which is called the rhetorical theory of fictionality. This theory was proposed by Henrik Skov Nielsen, James Phelan, and Richard Walsh in 2015, and in an article called 10 Theses about fictionality. And the rhetorical theory shares with the naive theory the idea that fiction is invention. But it differs from the naive theory in that it regards fiction as invention that is meant to be recognized by the audience so that you can tell the difference between lies and errors and fiction. So, recognizable invention. One of the main points of this theory is that fiction is not limited to what they call generic fiction. Generic fiction is just novels and short stories or film, the kind that you find in literature. According to these authors, fiction comprises hypotheticals, counterfactuals, speculations, and other deviations from the actual. They believe that fictionality can appear on either the local or the global level. So there are globally fictional texts that have non-fictional parts, and vice versa. You can introduce fiction in a discourse that is itself not fictional. And one of the examples of local fictionality in a globally non-fictional discourse is an example from Barack Obama during the campaign of 2012, when he said that his opponent, what's his opponent's name? Mitt Romney suffered from rhomnesia. Rhomnesia is a disease that Obama invented, and obviously he meant this as something that was not true. He didn't want people to believe that Romney had rhomnesia. And the reason he accused Romney of rhomnesia is that Romney, when he was governor of Massachusetts, had installed an insurance plan that he now rejected because he's a Republican and Republicans are not supposed to support insurance. So rhomnesia was a form of amnesia. Another idea of this rhetorical theory is that fictionality is a rhetorical device that people use to make statements about the real world. So in the case of rhomnesia, Obama wanted to satirize the change of position of Mitt Romney. And they also apply this to literature, and so according to this theory, most of literature becomes didactic. It has a message about the real world. Then I will contrast this theory with what is probably the oldest philosophical theory of fictionality, which is due to John Searle, and he described fiction as pretended speech acts. It dates from 1975. And so this is a very famous account. He begins his article by comparing two texts. On the left side, you have a news from the New York Times, and on the right side, you have the beginning of a novel. And so Searle says, well, the language is used in exactly the same way in both texts. This means that there is no special language of fiction. He also says that both texts rely on the same speech act, the speech act of assertion. He rejects the idea that there is a speech act specific to fiction, such as writing a novel. So his idea is that the author of a fiction is pretending to perform speech act, but is not following all the rules of the speech act. Each speech act for Searle comes together with various conditions. The most important is the sincerity condition, which says the speaker commit himself to a belief in the truth of the expressed proposition. So when a novelist writes a novel, he does not follow the sincerity condition. The author of the novel is not committed to the truth of what he's writing. So these are the two worldless theories. Now I move to the world-based theories, and the first one is also very famous, Kendall Walton's theory of fiction as prop in a game of make-believe, which dates from 1990. And Walton's idea is that in order to understand paintings, plays, films, and novels, we must first look at dolls, hobby horses, toy trucks, and teddy bears, the activities in which representational work of art are embedded and which give them their point are best seen as continuous with children's games of make-believe. In all these examples, all examples of fiction, you take something for something else. For instance, when you play with a doll, you take the doll to be a baby. When you watch a play, you take the actors to be the characters. When you read a novel, you take the novel to be an actual report of facts, but you do not believe it. And Walton even extends this theory to a painting, and he says when you watch a painting, you pretend, you make believe that you are facing a boat, a house, a person, but you know that it is not true. So it makes a contrast between believing and make-believe pretending. And so when you read a fiction, you construct what he calls fictional truths. And these are propositions, facts, but these facts do not relate to the real world. You don't believe them. They relate to a fictional world. So he invents this expression of fictional truth, which for many people is an oxymoron, because you cannot have something that is both true and fictional. But for Eco, it is possible. My next theory is, in fact, my own theory, which is based on this idea of possible worlds, on the theory of possible worlds, but it also incorporates ideas from Umberto Eco, from David Lewis, from even Searle, and from Walton. So, according to possible world theory, there is not just one world, there is a world that is the actual world where we live, and there are some alternate possible worlds that are not realized. And since the authors of fictions are real people, they all exist within the real world. But the narrator of fictions exists in another possible world. So according to David Lewis, here at our world, we have a fiction F told in an act of storytelling, told by an author to a real audience. At some other world, we have an act A prime of telling the truth about some known matter of fact. The stories in A and A prime match word for word, and the words have the same meaning. But I think the two transactions are not exactly symmetrical, because the blue transaction refers to another world, but within this imaginary world, the narrator is communicating with the narratee by telling about the world where they both exist. So when you read Anna Karenina, from our point of view, it takes place in an alternative possible world, but from the point of the narrator, it is a fact that takes place in the narrator's world. My own addition to Lewis' analysis consists of distinguishing the world image presented by the text, which I call the story world, from the world that is targeted by the text as a reference world. In my opinion, all narrative texts, whether they are fictional or not, project a story world. And you construct this story world on the basis of the information that you gather from the text. But the difference between, this is a text. Out of the text, the reader constructs a story world. But the difference between fiction and fact is that in the case of a factual world, the story world refers to the real world, so that the reader will compare his image of the story world to what he knows about the real world, and if he agrees with it, he will incorporate the story world into his knowledge of the actual world, or if he doesn't believe, he will reject it. But there is this act of comparison that takes place. While when it is a fiction, the story world is the story world is self-referential. You construct the story world in your mind, and this activity of constructing it is a self-rewarding activity. You find your pleasure in constructing it. So this is a question of different reference. And of course, so you could say that in the case of fact, the story world is an image of the actual world, while in the case of fiction, the story world is invented, projected by the text. And because the factual text has a reference world that is external to it, it can be true or false. But a fiction, because it invents its words, you cannot say it's true or false. You have to accept what is said about it. Another addition I've made is to suggest this idea of recentering in a fictional world, which explains the phenomenon of immersion. So you are located in a real world, but when you read a fiction, you are transported into that other world, and for the duration of your reading, you regard it as real. So from the point of view of this dragon, the real world is the world where he exists. From the point of view of the girl in the blue world, the real world is the world with a stack of books, but once she transports herself, she enters a different reality. But this activity of recentering is not a one-way trip. You can always decenter yourself, return to the real world, and look at the fictional world from a distance. And in my opinion, this decentering is what allows you an aesthetic evaluation of the text. You look at the language, you look how it is constructed by the author, you evaluate the performance of the author. So from inside the fictional world, you cannot do this activity of evaluation. You need to return to reality. Now, what is a world? According to the dictionary, a world is defined as all that exists. So it means the characters, the space, the time, the evolution of the narrative. But we can conceive this idea of world in two ways. We can conceive it as a container for everything that happens in the text, or we can conceive it as a network of relations. So if we conceive it as a container, all the novels of Jane Austen take place in the same world because they all take place in the world of 19th century British aristocracy. But there are no relation between the characters of one novel and another novel. The characters of Pride and Prejudice don't know the characters of Sense and Sensibility. So if you regard the world as a container, there is just one world for Jane Austen. But if you regard it as a network of relation, then every novel projects a different world. And but several texts can share the same world. We see that with novels of Proust, of Balzac, where you have recurrent characters, or nowadays with these large imaginary universes such as Star Wars. So I personally subscribe to a notion of world as a network of relations. Okay, so now I have defined my four theories, and I'd like to ask of them a number of questions to see how they differ. So first are fake news fiction. I mean, they are, according to the naive theory, they are not true, therefore they are fiction. But according to all the other theories, they are not fiction for different reasons. For the rhetorical approach, they are not fiction because the invention is hidden. They don't display their fictional character. For Searle, speech act theory, they are not fiction because they are seriously, the speech act is seriously performed. For Walton, make-believe theory, because the audience of fake news are asked to believe and not to make believe and not to pretend. And from the possible world theory, they are not fiction because the reference world is a real world and not a non-actual possible world. So this is the first question. Now I will leave, I will forget the naive theory because it's not very interesting, and I will focus on the other four. Are counterfactuals and short experiments fiction? By counterfactuals, I mean expression with if, then, such as these are popular with sports fans who will say, well, if the referee had not been blind, our team would have won the game. This is an example of counterfactual. And short experiments are imaginary scenarios that are used in science or philosophy to demonstrate certain ideas. This is the imaginary scenario of Schrödinger's cat, which was used by Schrödinger to demonstrate the possibility, but also the absurdity of the idea of superposition of states. So how do our theories treat these examples? For the rhetorical approach, counterfactual and short experiments represent local fictionality in a text that is globally non-fictional, because they are invented. So for them, for the rhetorical approach, they are straight fiction. For Searle theory, they are not fictional because there is not pretense going on. If you utter a counterfactual, you do it sincerely and seriously. For Walton, they are not counterfactual because they are not used to stimulate the imagination. They say something very specific, and this, they have a message about the real world, and they do not ask the reader to imagine a different world. And for the possible world theory, they are not fiction because they refer to the real world and not to a possible world. Next question. Can fiction contain true statements about real-world entities? This is a problem that is very acute in historical fiction, for instance, in Tolstoy's War and Peace, where you have a character named Napoleon who corresponds to a historical character, and Tolstoy says many things about Napoleon that are actually true in the real world. So how do our theories deal with this problem? According to the rhetorical theory, a fiction can be a patchwork of true statements and of invented statements. So when you read War and Peace, you will sort out what is true, what is fact, and what is invented. So there is no real unity to the text. I wouldn't say the fictional world because the rhetorical theory does not use a notion of world. So you have this Swiss cheese configuration of true and false. And for Searle's theory, same thing. He says that you can have sincerely asserted proposition within a fiction and you have pretended assertion. So there's a quote from Searle: "In War and Peace, the story of Pierre and Natasha is a fictional story about fictional characters, but the Russia of War and Peace is the real Russia, and the war against Napoleon is the real war against the real Napoleon." So again, this Swiss cheese configuration. The two world-based theory reject this idea that a fiction is a patchwork. They think that there is a unity to the fictional world, and if we divide it into what's true and what's not true, we won't be able to be immersed in the fiction. So for both world-based theories, everything that is said by the narrator or by the text is true in the fictional world, and Napoleon, he has some features that are verified in the actual world, such as being emperor, but he has also features that are not verified, such as existing in the same world as Pierre and Natasha. Is a composite, but we forget about his being a composite. Everything is true about Napoleon once you relocate yourself into the world of war and peace. So for possible world theory, here's a number of possible worlds, and they resemble each other according to certain features. So there is Napoleon of the real world, but there is another Napoleon in War and Peace who has certain features in common with the real Napoleon, but also some different features. He coexists with Pierre and Natasha. In a more remote fiction, you can have a Napoleon who loses at Waterloo and escapes to New Orleans. In an even more remote world, he will win at Waterloo and conquer England. And in an even more remote world, there is no Napoleon whatsoever. But all these Napoleons are autonomous characters. They have a unity. When you read these other novels, you think that everything that is said about these Napoleons is true. So this is the possible world approach to the mixture of real fact and invented fact in fiction. All is true of the fictional world. Okay, and my last question, is the border between fiction and non-fiction analog or binary? In classical logic, the truth of a proposition is a binary matter. If you say Trump was elected in 2016, this is either true or false. But there are also some predicates that are a matter of degree. See, if I say Trump is fat, he's more or less fat. So you have the same thing in textual matters or in discourse matters. There are some form of discourse where you have to be absolutely truthful. And this is news in a newspaper, excluding fake news, history, biography, or if you testify in front of a court. What's expected of you is the truth, all the truth, and nothing but the truth. But there are also some genres that are basically not fictional, but where the condition of truth are more relaxed. For instance, in an autobiography, authors do not have to prove everything that they say about themselves, because they just know. They cannot have footnotes to say they were born in such and such year. They don't need footnotes to say what thoughts they have when their husband or wife died. So in autobiography, a lot is not documented, but you never know as a reader whether it really happened or not, because a lot of autobiography is based on memory, and memory is not very reliable. So the truth standards of autobiography are much lower than the truth standards of history. And another genre that has fairly low truth standards is gossip and the narrative of conversation. If you tell a story during a conversation, you want to entertain your audience. So you have two different requirements. You have to be your story has to be true, but it has to be amusing. And in order for your story to be amusing, you have to exaggerate, you use direct dialogue, you invent things that you don't remember. So I think that oral storytelling has very low truth standards. So in narrative, written narrative, you also have some narratives that are on the borderline, pretty much like oral storytelling. This is a famous case in Cold Blood by Truman Capote. Tells a story that really happened. It was a murder in Kansas in 1969, but in order to narrate it, Truman Capote used the techniques of novelists. For instance, there are dialogues, reports of the shorts of characters, and everything is very lively. You have the impression of being on the scene. And here the text on the left is the text that is on the cover of the book, and it says, you get mesmerizing suspense and astonishing empathy. This is not what you would have if it were really a work of history. So this genre, which is becoming very popular, is called sometimes fiction, sometimes true fiction, sometimes non-fiction novels, sometimes creative non-fiction. So what do we do with this genre? How do our theories deal with it? So the rhetorical theory will say that since you have two levels, you have the global level and the local level. On the local level, In True Blood has some true facts and some invented one, so it's a mixture of truth and fiction. But on a global level, it has to be either fact or fiction. But the theory doesn't tell us. It doesn't tell us if it's a global factual text with fiction inside or if it's a global fiction with truth inside. So it's indeterminate as to what to do. Searle has nothing to say about this hybrid text. So for Walton, readers either imagine or they believe. When it's a factual text, they believe. When it's a fiction, they imagine. But certain texts can be read both as fiction or as a fact. And when you have a very well-written work of history, it will stimulate your imagination, and you don't care whether it is true or not. So for Walton, you can combine fictionality and factuality. And I think for possible world theory, fiction and fact have different reference worlds. Fiction refers to an imaginary world, fact to the real world, but some texts can have a double reference. So that's how it would work. With Truman Capote, on one hand, you know that it's based on a true crime, and there is lots that you can believe and integrate into your knowledge of the real world. But it also stimulates your imagination, and so you have from this text the pleasure that you get from a fiction. And for some readers, the self-referentiality will be more important. For other readers, the real-world reference will be more important, but it's all a matter of degree. So I will conclude by presenting different view of how we can deal with this continuum that goes from truth to falsity in fiction. You can have a simple continuum explanation that goes from science, history, and news, which must respect the truth, all the way to fantasy, where you can make up everything, and in the middle you have true fiction, like in Cold Blood, or historical novel like War and Peace. So that's one possibility. But I think this representation misses one thing, is that there is a sharp distinction between writing fiction and telling the truth. It's a matter of ethical responsibility. Authors are not ethically responsible for the truth when they do fiction. So we need to have a clear border. So on the left side, you have a continuum from strong facts to weak facts. But on the fiction side, you don't have a continuum, because I think that a historical novel is just as fictional as a work of fantasy. So there is just one form of fiction. But the problem with such a model, it does not account very well for texts like In Cold Blood. So we could say, well, there is a kind of no man's land in the middle, where texts are neither fact nor fiction. But I think this is not a good solution, because if a text is neither fact nor fiction, there's no reason for readers to be interested in this text. It means that it will not provide knowledge about the real world, but constructing the world will not be rewarding. So I reject this view. And I would rather have this view, where the territory of fact and the territory of fiction overlap, so that you have some text that satisfies both needs. I think that I have covered all the possibilities with these four models, and if you don't like any of them, you can also always revert to the idea of post-truth and say there's no distinction between truth and fact. Thank you.